I'm Jeffrey Reddick, and this is St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime.
Inspiration 4 is go for launch. Punch it, SpaceX.
People all over the world watched this moment in September. Inspiration 4, the first all-civilian orbital space mission lifting off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the point of origin for the Apollo missions and the Space Shuttle, now hosting a new era of private space exploration. Some patients of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital were at the launch, watching one of their own leave the planet. Some along the East Coast simply stepped out their front doors to gaze at the trail of the spacecraft arcing through the nighttime sky. Other St. Jude patients joined the 4 crew members in orbit, virtually, asking the important questions.
What's your favorite space food?
My favorite space food is pizza, which I had yesterday and I'll probably have tonight for dinner also.
Turns out, some things are the same in space and here on Earth. Pizza is great everywhere. St. Jude has been at the forefront of this mission to space, and that's what we're going to focus on now. How the 2 missions fit together, and what we can learn from each one. Stay with us. Jared Isaacman, Chris Zembrowski, Dr. Cyan Proctor, and Hayley Arceneaux, the crew members of Inspiration 4, they've been back on Earth long enough to reflect on their experiences in space, and they've talked about how moving it was, life-changing, to see the planet from that vantage point, and how their 3-day mission underscores just how much more there is to learn about space. Inspiration 4 notched a few milestones. One of its goals was to raise $200 million for St. Jude. The actual number is more than $238 million, and the mission saw the first Black woman to pilot a spacecraft, Cyan Proctor. And then there's Hayley Arceneaux, once a St. Jude patient, now a physician assistant there, and the youngest American in space. And she's who we're going to hear from today. Let me bring in my colleague Anna Bergadal now. Anna, it's great to see you again.
Great to be back. So much has happened since we were together last.
That's true. And it's been a few weeks since liftoff and splashdown and, everything that happened in between, of course. And you work in the department that makes videos to tell stories about patients and families and, things like Inspiration 4. So how busy have you been?
Well, it has been a busy time. Of course, now that the crew has actually been to space, we've got so many more stories to tell about what that was like and how it's changed them. We thought things might slow down a little post-launch, but the mission has caught the attention of so many people, and so it's important to keep that momentum going.
Yeah. How do you think that this mission has been received in the kind of wider world?
Well, as we've said, there have always been 2 missions, the mission of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the mission of democratizing space travel. So I think this has shed new light on both of those causes and the sheer value of furthering research into both initiatives. And while there have been other flights to space, this Inspiration 4 crew went deeper into space. They spent more time in space. I think the takeaway for the eyes and ears of the world was this mission mattered to everyone. And that was the goal of Inspiration 4 Commander Jared Isaacman, and I truly think he achieved that goal.
Yeah. What's the mood on the St. Jude campus like?
Well, for one thing, we're able to breathe now. I think we were holding our breath on pins and needles during launch and even orbit and then, of course, splashdown. And now there's just pure excitement on campus and gratitude. Gratitude for their safe return and for everyone who helped us not only meet but exceed our fundraising goal. And then we celebrated Hayley with a parade that passed through our campus. And along that parade route, there were patients, hospital staff, and employees who raised funds for the hospital. It was so exciting just to see her in person and hear from her because she spoke to all the groups along that parade route.
It was such a joyful day.
It really was.
So I know that you've had a chance to talk to Hayley, and I got to talk with her mom, Colleen Arceneaux, and we're going to kind of compare their impressions about the Inspiration 4 mission.
Right. And those are two very different perspectives for obvious reasons.
Yes. So let's rewind all the way back to the time before launch. There was a week of quarantine ahead of that, where all of the crew members were together with their family members and some of the people from SpaceX, too.
That's right. Of course, the crew had obligations, lots to do, going over procedures and that sort of thing. Their last chance to practice before the real thing. And they started to shift their sleep schedules so they could be well rested for a nighttime launch. But there was family time, too. A lot was planned. Hayley says they went kayaking together and played a lot of board games, which she was sure to mention that her family did not let her win. And Hayley spent some time on her own, too. She actually had to write 2 sets of letters to her family. The first one was for celebration.
And I remember I started my mom's letter off with, okay, take a deep breath. I've made it to orbit. And then just told her like how appreciative I was of all of her support. And I hope she enjoyed that time while I was in space. And then I ended it with, I can't wait to see you and give you a hug when I get back, but please don't crush me.
And then there were letters, in case things didn't go as planned.
It's the reality of space travel is it doesn't come with a zero risk. And writing the letters that my family would receive if things didn't go well was difficult. And I'm so glad they didn't get the letters.
I feel like the whole world agrees with her there.
Absolutely.
So then comes launch day. And Colleen, of course, along with the rest of the family members, is there to see it. And she told me that she was actually really calm.
The day of launch, I woke up and I was fine. And it was almost embarrassing that I wasn't, like as nervous as other people seem to be.
Yeah. I mean, Hayley also said she felt calm and confident. They had done a dress rehearsal for everything, including saying goodbye to their family members. And Hayley said she was actually more emotional saying goodbye for that than she was on launch day. I mean, maybe that's why they have a practice run. It's important even for that emotional preparation.
Yeah.
And there's this moment I love where they're all suited up on the launch pad and locking arm in arm, grabbing onto each other and leaning back to see the top of the rocket. It was so tall, they had to hold each other up to balance so they could look up. And then came the waiting. Remember, Hayley had been wondering what she would be thinking in those hours between being strapped in the capsule and lifting off.
Right.
My crew members and I were joking around. Cyan was playing some music, and we just all were so ready. And I think that we were just so well trained that we had sat through waiting for 2.5 hours for liftoff, and all the checkouts that happened during that time. And so we really knew what to expect. But we weren't nervous. And I kept waiting for the nerves to kick in. And I was like, okay, well, maybe like when this part happens, I'll get nervous, or maybe at this point. And it didn't kick in. And then they're counting down from 10. And I just feel so ready.
So after the countdown, it's go time. Exactly.
Liftoff. And she says it was very smooth.
We felt the jolt with liftoff. And then it was a smooth ride. We could hear outside this like sound of like how fast we were going. And I've never heard anything like that. I couldn't believe how fast we were going. And then when the first engine cut off, we had this moment where we were kind of forward hanging in our straps and waiting for the second engine to come on. And then it came on. We were so excited, kind of pushed back again. And then it slowly built up in intensity and in G-forces. And then before we knew it, stillness and silence and blackness. And my strap started floating. And then I had in my satchel our zero-G indicator, little Jude, the dog, the St. Jude therapy dog, and I got to throw him out and he started floating.
I remember seeing that on the feed from the launch, that moment when the dog comes out with the floppy ears kind of floating around there.
That was a highlight during the mission. Even the ground crew at SpaceX really got a kick out of that. Historically, astronauts take something into space that has a special meaning, anything from a baseball to a Yoda. But when they become weightless, they're strapped in, so they release something into the capsule to indicate that microgravity. And for Inspiration 4, the zero gravity indicator was a plush dog in a spacesuit. It's modeled after the St. Jude facility dogs that are trained to work with St. Jude patients to ease anxiety and help them cope through their treatment.
Yeah. So the launch happens. They're in orbit. What did they do during those 3 days? I'm sure they were really busy.
They were very busy. Actually, they had a very specific calendar. Their days were planned out by SpaceX. There was research to do and duties that were part of their individual roles. She said they performed their best, they were well trained, and they took their roles very seriously. They knew there were so many people watching.
Did Hayley get any moments to herself?
She did, surprisingly, in that small of a space, but she actually said she got a lot of reflective time in that cupola. That was that giant dome window, the biggest window ever to go to space. That was her favorite spot.
When I was in the cupola, I could see the entire 360 view of the Earth with the blackness of space around it, with stars and the moon. And it was just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was just so awestruck. And that's that moment that changed my life.
How?
When I saw the Earth from the cupola, I was filled with just this intense feeling of gratitude. Like I could not believe what I was seeing and that I was getting to experience that. And that feeling of gratitude is going to stick with me forever. I've always had a lot of gratitude just to be alive for every single day that I've been given and for St. Jude. But it gave me a whole new perspective on gratitude. And I can't believe that happened to me.
So she says she took a lot of photos of that view from the cupola, but also made an effort to put the phone away and just be in the moment. She realized she probably would never see Earth like that again.
Yeah.
And I should say, it wasn't all science and serious work. They did have fun, especially at mealtime when instead of just eating the food, they first let it float and then they'd have to catch it hands-free.
Every single meal we ate in space, we played with more than we ate. Actually catching food in space is a lot harder than it seems, especially when I was trying to catch pieces of pizza that were square, and I just could not grasp it. And Jared really insisted that we had peanut M&Ms, and these are small and going fast. Took a lot of skill. Chris never missed. He was fantastic. They were all pretty good, but we really had to learn how to do it, because the first day, as soon as we get to space, our first meal, we're like, oh yeah, let's try to catch some peanut M&Ms. And I take the peanut M&M and I throw it. And and on Earth with gravity, you'd have to throw it pretty hard, but in space, it just shot and then it was bouncing off of things. And so we had to learn the technique of a slow throw.
I love that. The image of that thing bouncing around and then the slow throw.
Exactly. Harder than it looks, apparently. And they had some other fun moments, too. They talked to their loved ones and talked to some celebrities. Tom Cruise, Elon Musk, and Bono from U2. Cyan Proctor is a big fan of U2. So she wanted one of her calls to be with Bono. Hayley says he wrote them a poem, which is interesting. But she says by far the highlight of the mission for her was the call they had with St. Jude patients.
A lot of the kids on the call were my own patients who I've gotten to know really well and gotten to treat and see on some of their best days, some of their worst days. And getting to hear their voices from space motivated me in a whole different way. And I think my crew members felt the same way.
We all saw that call, and I was particularly looking at all of the other crew members during it. I really feel like they were as excited about that as Hayley was. And she says her crew members are just a part of the St. Jude family now. She says Chris and Cyan have held personal fundraisers, and they're really invested in the mission of St. Jude.
Yeah. Colleen told me that she got to see that call too, and she was really excited about it. She told me that it reminded her of what it felt like for her to be at St. Jude, kind of seeing the way that the staff interacts with the patients.
And I loved seeing Hayley floating upside down for most of the call, because she really wanted the kids to see that she was floating, that they were in space, not just sitting there, where she said kids are visual. They need to see that. And she wanted to make sure her hair was all wild for them to see that, hair grows back and it can grow back in a fabulous way.
I feel like that's one of the ways that Inspiration 4 is going to have this like staying power into the future, is the combination of the two missions. It wasn't just a way to tell the story of St. Jude. It wasn't just a 3-day orbital mission. The sum is greater than the parts.
Yeah. And Hayley says that call is really when she felt that feeling of purpose.
It just felt so full circle. Like, I've been on this journey for almost 20 years, and a lot has happened in the last 20 years. And now I have my dream job, which really feels like my purpose in life. And I thought everything was really settled after I got my dream job. And then when I got this call to go to space, it was almost confusing because I thought, I have my purpose. I'm working with the kids. But then I realized I could reach so many more kids and so many other St. Jude patients who I wouldn't have crossed paths with.
Thinking about what she's saying there, how St. Jude patients can have this huge effect on people they don't even know. It reminds me of something that Colleen talked about with Hayley's story and what it might mean to the parents of patients because of what it meant to her to meet former patients back when Hayley was in treatment. She told me about meeting one person in particular when Hayley was little. And this was someone who was just visiting the campus because she was going to run in a St. Jude fundraising race.
And I noticed she had an armband on, like a St. Jude patient armband. And I went up to her and I said, "Are you with the race?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm running in that." And I said, "Are you a patient?" And she said, "I used to be." I burst into tears. I was so overcome with joy and excitement about seeing that, because I remember thinking, like, Hayley was so sick and she looked so sick and frail and her coloring and everything. And to think that she could look like this girl, the picture of health, like, oh my God, she really could grow up and get healthy again.
Those moments happen on the St. Jude campus all the time. And the Inspiration 4 mission really allowed people all over the world to experience what they're like.
So Hayley's status as a pediatric cancer survivor, that was just one of the ways that she made history in this mission. She was also the youngest American in space and the only person with an internal prosthetic. She had bone cancer, osteosarcoma, and so a part of one of her femurs was replaced. I know that going into the mission, that was kind of a question. Mm-hmm. What would happen with her internal prosthetic? So what happened?
Well, she said she had zero pain during those 3 days in space. Zero gravity helps, but she did have some pain during part of the training during launch simulations.
Sitting in the seat in the launch position for hours was actually really painful for my leg. And SpaceX took that seriously, and they were able to make a new footrest that helped the positioning and reduced my pain. And, I was at first a little embarrassed about it, but then I thought, more and more people are going to go to space, and that includes the not physically perfect crowd. And now we have a footrest that helps more people.
That goes back to what Cyan Proctor talked about with you in our first episode. About wanting to have a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive approach to space exploration.
Exactly.
So after 3 days in orbit and, having the calls with celebrities and doing the experiments that they needed to do, it was time to come back to Earth. Colleen told me that day was really stressful for her. The peaceful feeling that she felt at launch had kind of run out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Hayley says re-entry was the most intimidating part of the mission.
When we started re-entering the atmosphere, we saw flashes of bright light that kind of looked like lightning. And then I saw a flash of red. And then at that point, our windows were fogged and we couldn't see anything else. And then we just felt. Even when we splashed down, this huge wave came about that we heard and we felt but couldn't see.
So Splashdown represented two milestones in a way. There's the physical end of the mission, but then part of the goal of Inspiration 4 was to raise $200 million for St. Jude.
Right.
And after Splashdown, we learned that goal was actually met and exceeded.
Yeah. And Colleen talked with me about how important that fundraising goal was, that moment of meeting the goal, because of what it represents for the future of treatment. The way she put it to me is the survival rate is not 100%, and that means there's more work to do. She told me this story about Hayley's journey when she came back to St. Jude as a 20-year-old to have her all-clear appointment, and she wanted to visit another patient who also had osteosarcoma. And when Hayley went up to see her, the nurses told her that she had passed away. And for Colleen, that made it so real that the outcome that Hayley had was not guaranteed. And so she sees the fundraising effort around Inspiration 4 as a way to bring that positive outcome that Hayley had to more families.
Right. The Inspiration 4 mission may be over, but the St. Jude mission continues. It has to.
Yeah, and that's something that Hayley certainly realizes, of course, and I know that she's going to be getting back into her work of that mission, working as a physician assistant with her patients. And of course, now she brings this extra dimension of her astronaut training to that as well. She's a veteran astronaut at this point. And I felt like I had to ask Colleen if she knows whether Hayley's plans include a return trip.
I asked her already, and she said, someone else deserves a chance. Someone else deserves that opportunity. She had her opportunity, which my son quickly said, I'll go next. And I thought, oh, great.
So maybe 2 kids in space is one too many for Colleen?
Exactly. I can't even imagine. I did bring up the future to Hayley, too, because I wondered if she's anxious for life just to get back to normal, or is this simply just a chapter of the new normal?
I was worried about how I would feel after the mission, going back to regular life. But I just feel so content, so just happy that the mission happened, that everything went well. We got to do everything we wanted to do. It couldn't have gone better. And now I get to continue sharing this experience with my patients. And I'm so excited to get back to work with them. These kids have my entire heart.
That's a beautiful way to put her experience into perspective. And I cannot think of a better way to close this episode. Anna, I want to thank you for all of your months of reporting and interviewing and for talking with me about Inspiration 4 today.
Well, you know, Jeffrey, sitting in this seat has been one of the highlights of this mission for me. So thanks to you for having me along for the ride.
St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime is a production of St. Jude Inspire. We have reporting from Anna Berkedahl, audio recording by Mike Hamlet and Orlando Pelias. We're edited by Grace Korziqua Evans. Lewis Graham is the executive producer. I'm Jeffrey Reddick. You can find the other episodes of this podcast and more about the Inspiration 4 mission online at stjude.org/inspire. That's also where you can make a donation to St. Jude. And we're on social media. Just search for St. Jude. Be sure to subscribe to St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime for any bonus content that we have for you in the coming weeks. And this is where we'll tell you about other podcasts we're working on too. I want to say thanks to everyone who spoke to us, and thanks especially to Hayley Arceneaux for sharing her story and telling us about the little moments that stick with her, like this one.
The first thing I wanted to do when I got back to Earth was eat real food. I mean, the food in space was great, but I wanted other food, which for me was fried chicken. And they had that on the recovery boat for us.
Oh my gosh, on the boat?
Yeah, no, I got out of my spacesuit and I said, all right, where's the fried chicken?